Hi, my name's Phil. I like to talk about politics. So we're ending our 4-week lockdown in just under a week's time in England, and we can see which restrictions now we'll face in the run-up to Christmas. Long story short, for a lot of people, there's a great deal of confusion as to why we even had the lockdown if the restrictions imposed upon them are harsher than after the lockdown than before. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news in politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, after the lockdown, we're going to be re-entering the tier system again, except it's not the tier system as it was known. It's a completely different tier system. So, tier 1 is classed as medium alert. There is no low alert. It's very important to say there is nowhere in England that can be considered a low alert area. But Tier 1 affects almost nobody. It's 1% of the population. It's the Isle of Wight, the Isles of Scilly and Cornwall. That's it. Those are the only parts of England in Tier 1. Into Tier 2 go London, Tory lands, and then Tier 3 is mostly for Labour areas, mostly in the north of England. Now, the reason is that the lockdown didn't really get control of the virus. We still have another week to go. And if you look at the figures for new daily cases, you go, oh, it's going down. The number of new cases each day is definitely going down. It's been going down over a sustained period of time of about a week, and it will hopefully continue that trend for the next week as well. But as soon as the reins are loosened, there's a danger that it will go back up again. And you know, people really need to understand, I think, that the infection rates they respond to our behaviour collectively. But it's difficult for people to understand this because, to be fair to them, the government have failed to present a simple, clear, consistent message throughout the crisis. For example, there are people who were living in a Tier 2 area before the lockdown. They're now going to be in a Tier 3 area. Like an area around where I'm based only just entered Tier 2. It was Tier 1. It only just entered Tier 2 in the same week as the lockdown was announced. So you might sort of think, you know, in terms of hierarchy, right at the start of Tier 2, then you have your lockdown, which is like a super tier, isn't it? And then when you come out of it, you're in Tier 3. So if you're not following things closely, well, this is confusing, isn't it? If the lockdown was helpful, then how come my area is being upgraded to a more severe set of restrictions then? And the reasons are simple, but the government would never say this. First of all, the tier system before the lockdown was a load of crap. The best thing that could be said about the tier system, and the best thing I could say about the tier system at the time, is it was at least clear. Because what happened before that with local restrictions, it's like, oh, we're gonna have local restrictions, which is fine, absolutely fine. The problem is people didn't necessarily know what the restrictions were applying in their area. Whereas if you say, right, there's going to be 3 types of restrictions, 3 tiers, all you need to do is to find out which area which tier your area is in, and then you just look up a nice easy chart on what you have to do in each tier. So it was presenting a simple message. The problem now is it's all changing. So the restrictions that applied under what was Tier 1 before are now going to be different. They need to be different because the tiers were crap before. But they need to be different. And they are different, and people may not really know what that difference is now. So what it was, Tier 1 was essentially you've got to leave the pubs at 10 p.m. Tier 2 was don't go into someone's house unless you're charging them for some service or other. And Tier 3 was actually, if you must go to the pub, can you at least eat a pie? Now, anyone thinking that that was going to have a major impact on reducing the rate of transmission across England, I think needs to have another little think about it. The second reason was that the lockdown itself was nothing like the first. We called it a lockdown. I mean, some called it a circuit break. That's the term that the scientific advisors used. See, during the first lockdown, from my point of view, the roads were clear, everything was clear. Yes, you did see people failing to comply with the distancing and social visits and all that lot. But by and large, people shut themselves away as requested. This time, I haven't. If I'd gone to certain places, I think, if I went to town centres, for example, I think I would have noticed a difference. I don't generally go to town centres unless I need to go to the bank. But the roads have been pretty busy. So like when I've gone to the supermarket, or when I've driven to and from the college where I do a bit of part-time work, the roads have still been busy. And it's not, thinking, oh, no, I'll just be coinciding with school traffic because schools didn't close, Phil. Yeah, I know that. No, it's not. First of all, I live a long way from the college. So, that's an awful lot of place in between that don't have schools that I'm driving through. And the other thing is I do half days. So one part of that journey on that given day is not at the start or the end of the school day. The traffic's still busy. It's still busy. There was one day when it looked like it had dropped. So I thought, oh, this is showing a difference. But it was just a coincidence. Every other day it was really busy. So basically, you weren't supposed to visit people's houses under the lockdown. Some shops were supposed to close, along with other services like hairdressers stuff. Other than that stupid hairdresser who thought she was protected by Magna Carta, even though that hasn't been enforced for centuries. You couldn't go to pubs at all. You couldn't eat in restaurants, and there were other businesses as well, like gyms as well, that were closed. Now, as lockdowns go, of course, it was better than nothing. And again, if you look at the only data that I can get access to, it certainly seems to have had an effect, turning the rates down, the rate of new infections each day as a bit of a downturn. But it was still a bit weak as lockdowns go. And in terms of decreasing the rate of new cases, again, you look at a graph, you go, oh, it's on the way down now. That's good, isn't it? Yes, it is good. But it is still important to remember that although that trend is downwards, it's still way higher than when the scientists were screaming at the government to go into lockdown. At the moment, the average number of new cases is about 19,000 a day. Now, when the government scientific advisors first called for the lockdown, it was 4,000 a day. It's not at all realistic to suppose that in these final few days of the lockdown, it will get back down to that level. And also bear in mind that that level was where the scientists were expressing alarm. So the reality is that the rate at the end of the lockdown will still be a lot higher than when scientists said it was too high to not have a lockdown. In which case you would probably say that, well, we need to extend the lockdown further. But politically difficult. Hazardous even for Johnson to try. He only just got away with this one, barely. And the Tory rebellion against further measures is growing. Even these revamped tier system. So Johnson has fallen back on easing restrictions a little in order to allow people a few days this Christmas to kill off some more pensioners. Now, at the end of the lockdown, there are another 3 weeks to go before that Christmas respite. Johnson has already promised the easing of restrictions. Now, this is the thing. He's not saying, right, well, we're planning on this easing of restrictions, but I may have to cancel it at the last minute. Politically, you can't. So that's where we're up to with this. He still can't afford a situation where it becomes so bad that the holiday period then with the further easing of measures, completely melts the NHS. Now, I've said it before and I'll say it again. Boris Johnson seems to be treating the COVID response as a negotiation. Not with the virus. Even Boris Johnson is stupid enough to try and negotiate with the virus. The scientists say what needs to be done, but Johnson takes that as, okay, so that's your starting negotiating position. It's like, no, this is what needs to be done. Yeah, okay, I hear you. But then the lunatics in his party don't want to accept any measures at all. So he goes, oh, right, that's your negotiating position. And then he seems to see his job as some sort of broker to compromise between the two. But what that inevitably means is that you are introducing uneducated nutters into the solution of a complex and very serious problem. Imagine if this had happened when we were building the Channel Tunnel. If the French used engineers and our government at the time allowed the ERG in on the planning at our end. It would never have met in the middle. A social psychologist who has been interviewed for Channel 4 News yesterday explained that for the tier system to be effective, it has to be clear and it has to be fair. Now, it's not clear because they keep changing what each tier means. It is also not seen as fair because you can have two regions that appear to be identical in terms of how serious the problem is there, and yet one is in tier 2 and one is in tier 3. And there are too many regions where this is the case for it just to be, it's sort of borderline, that one just happened to fall on tier 2, that on tier 3. There are far too many of these cases. And the reason why the tier system, just like every other approach to COVID that the government have taken, is neither clear nor fair, is because it changes on a whim because it's led by the politics. because Boris Johnson's approach to government is to fight the fire he lit the day before and then start a new one for the next day. You know, there is no long-term planning, so the message can't be clear. In addition, he needs to manage the situation politically, like I said. So his Brexit plan, for example, hinged on packing out Parliament with as many MPs as possible with a very poor grip on reality in order to shaft the country with his hard Brexit. But this is a bit of a problem when you need to deal with a genuine issue. And he can't afford to upset too many of those lunatics, as you know, so he has to downgrade quite a lot of Conservative areas to tier 2 from what should be tier 3 in order to manage that political balancing act. But this then renders the system clearly unfair as well. And people don't like being treated unfairly, so they are more likely to rebel. Compliance goes down. You know, the end result of this will all become apparent in January, just as this autumn had become apparent even during the summer. You know, even when people were trying to deny that the second wave would even arrive. The scene was set. That's all there was to it. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.